Hello and welcome, everybody, once again to a brand new episode of r/MaliciousCompliance. My name's Ryan, the official host, the voice behind Reddit Voice, bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do, however, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as make sure you have notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. Now that we got that out of the way, let me tell you a little story by SD Beer Guy. It's 8 days old and it's called I Can't Drive Anywhere Without Permission? Okay, I'll follow that rule maliciously. This happened when I was 16 years old and just got my driver's license. My parents had me run to the store to pick up some groceries. I stopped by my friend's house on the way back home for maybe 5 minutes to show him I got my license and I was out driving alone. It was a really fun moment in the life of a 16-year-old. My stepmom, Marianne, freaked out. "We did not give you permission to drive to Bill's house. We told you to go to the store and that is all." I told Marianne and my dad that they had let me drive to Matt's house the day before, so I didn't think it was a big deal. They were unreasonable and laid down the undependable rule that set up the malicious compliance. "You are not allowed to drive anywhere. We do not give explicit permission for you to drive. Period. End of sentence. Just because you were allowed to do it previously does not ever give you permission to do it another time. Ever." Fast forward 3 days later. My 13-year-old stepsister has been a jerk to me all day, and I'm sick of her BS. She goes quiet for about 30 minutes, then comes out all sticky sweet. "Hey Brian, it's time to take me to ballet." I've taken her to ballet 3 days a week since I got my license. It's basically one of my chores. But I see my opportunity to say screw you to all three of them at once. "Sorry, Tina, I'm not allowed to take you to ballet. Parents didn't tell me to take you, and I don't want to get in trouble." She screams, she cries, she begs, she threatens. She calls her mom and leaves a message. She calls my dad and leaves a message. Just like Steve Miller says, time keeps on slipping into the future. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to hang on to the bitter end and actually go through with it. I'm shaking, but I know I've got them dead to rights. No call back from the parents, and the clock goes on past the start of her class. Stepmom comes home, and Tina runs to meet her. "Tina, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be at ballet." I hear Tina tell her rendition of the story, leaving out how miserable she had been, and they go back and forth. Marianne comes pounding down the hall and yells, as God is my witness, "You just wait till your father gets home." I had to stifle a laugh because I never really believed people actually said that. An hour later, Dad comes home and the two of them go running out to meet him and tell him how horrible I was. I wait in my room for the hammer to fall. About 10 minutes later, my dad calls down the hall. "Brian, would you please come here and talk to us?" "Well, Brian, you did it." "What do you mean, Dad?" "You got us all, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. Okay, let's make this reasonable for everyone." And they did. They agreed that they were over the top. They recognized that Tina isn't always very nice to me, and they spoke to her about that. I was allowed to have reasonable freedom if I was driving somewhere, since I had good grades and I had never been in trouble. I walked down the hall and back to my room, back to my parents, with the world's biggest grin on my face. Our next story is by a boy named Scout 3 and it's called, "Was It Okay If I Fire You?" This is a story of malicious compliance that a previous boss had done, but involved me directly, as will be explained. The time frame is early 2000s for reference. In my late high school/early college years, I had a job telemarketing work during winter and summer breaks. While it was boiler room cold calling, we primarily were soliciting donations for agencies that had contracted us to do the work, so it felt a little less scuzzy. Think police departments, fire departments, etc. We kept a portion of donations for operating expenses, and everything over a certain threshold went directly to the receiving party. Everybody wins. I enjoyed the job as the scripts were simple. I was allowed to read a book and such between calls, and a number of my friends were also employed there so we could hang out during lunch breaks. The pay was a decent chunk above minimum wage at the time, so it was a good gig. I also had a knack for it, and at one point was fifth in sales across all their sites that they had in operation, second in our building. One summer, while driving to work, my car promptly dies with no warning, and I'm left stranded on the road. As you do in this situation, back before cell phones for poor college students were a thing, I walk to the nearest house and ask to use the phone. I call my dad, who starts driving to get me, and I call my work to let them know I'll be late. My boss says fine, and he'll chat with me when I get in. Father shows up with my mother in 2 cars. I take the extra, and he begins the arduous process of towing my car back to the house. This involved tying a rope to the front of the car and to the back of his vehicle and crawling back home so he could fix it himself. I've been in that back car, and it did not envy my father being in the back with only 10 feet of space between him and the car my mother was driving. But I'm off to work. I arrive to work, clock in almost an hour after the start of my shift, and am promptly told by the front receptionist that my boss would like to see me in his office. So I head on back. Beginning details completed, cue the start of the MC story. My boss and I have always had a good rapport. I'm a good worker, get good reviews, and he and I have similar interests outside of work we can chat about occasionally. When I arrive in his office, he's shuffling some papers around and has laid out a few documents facing me. As close as I can recall, this is the conversation that followed. "Hope everything worked out with the car. Glad to have you here. Couple things I need to discuss with you. First of all, as I'm sure you're aware, being more than 30 minutes late to work is considered a Class C violation. 3 classes from C to A, C being the least egregious, if insufficient time is given prior to the occurrence. This is your first violation, so I'd like to talk to you about what happens next." I'm sweating at this point. I've never been talked to about being out of order on anything while working here, and getting my first violation scared the heck out of me. So I'm sitting there, white-faced, and he continues. "No official write-up or anything occurs for a first violation, or even the first few Class C violations, but it is manager's discretion on the punishment depending on past behaviors. Now you are a good employee, and I've put into corporate a few times to give you a raise, but because you only work during your school breaks, it is denied as you aren't considered full-time. So the papers I have here are your termination papers and an offer letter I'd like to extend to hire you back on again. So in short, before I file these, I'd like to ask, is it okay if I fire you?" So we go through the process of him firing me, which then allowed him to extend an offer to me as to rehire me at roughly a 25% increase in pay. Since he could justify to corporate the bump as he was hiring someone with experience, in talking with him, he let me know it was something he occasionally did to the high school and college workers, just to get around the corporate's policy of not allowing raises to people who didn't work 1,000+ hours in a year. It was his own way of being maliciously compliant with a policy that didn't allow him to reward some people that he thought deserved it. He had been apparently waiting for me to do something that he could technically fire me for. The way their back-end system worked, it wouldn't even show up as a break in service. Since the firing and hiring happened on the same day, and since I never worked more than the minimum 1,000 hours each year, I didn't have any tenure or anything to be worried about losing. The laugh he and the receptionist had when he walked me back to the front to introduce her to the new employee was enjoyable, and I've had a fun story to tell ever since. TLDR, boss fires me for a minor infraction so he can then rehire me at a higher rate of pay. Edit. Thank you everyone for the comments and awards. I had to Google what the awards meant, as I've never made a post or comment that had more than a few upvotes in the past. I've been doing my best to keep up with comments and thanking the award people individually, but I know that there are many I missed or just didn't have the stamina to keep up with. I also wanted to answer a few commonly asked questions. Why did the fire department and police department need more money? This was more affiliated agencies and charities. Think the firefighters' boot drive they do every year. They don't keep your change you toss into the boot. It goes to a charitable cause. Did your dad fix the car, and what was wrong with it? Well, I'm not a car person, so I don't know what was wrong with it, but yes, my dad was able to fix it. 3. Do you keep in touch with the boss? This was close to 20 years ago, and unfortunately, I don't keep in touch with very many people from my hometown, including this wonderful man. Last I heard, he was still working there 4 to 5 years after I left, and it was still a great place to work. Many of your comments have me laughing, and I've enjoyed responding to them throughout the day and into the wee hours of the morning last night. But they're still coming in. Thank you all again for the enjoyable experience. I'm glad you have fun with my little retelling of years gone by. Well, there you have it, folks. The end of the epics. If you liked these stories, be sure to leave a like on the video, as well as make sure you're subscribed to our channel with notifications turned on so you could stay up to date with all future videos. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here, the voice behind Reddit Voice, uploading just about every single day, and I look forward to seeing you guys in tomorrow's video.